Today, on the Raging Atheist, we're going to be looking at something that happened last night between people that I would consider to be new friends of mine. Um, all people that I respect. But before we get into it, I want to give my thoughts on it now that I've watched it back again one time. And it's kind of the same thoughts I had while it was happening, though I stayed silent. The messenger reveals I would consider to be a friend. I think there's mutual respect. I think he respects me, and I definitely respect him. And I think from the conversation that you can see that the guy definitely knows what he's talking about when it comes to the field. Him and Shannon spar back and forth using lingo I could only suspect from that field because it was hard for me, a layman on the topic, to follow sometimes. But this is what I get, and this is what I really want to emphasize, is that it's like what me and Dr. Josh has talked about with the ancient astronaut theory, that if you're going to have really big claims, then you need to have a lot of evidence to back up those claims. And I think that's the frustration with the messenger revealed. I think he genuinely believes that he has found a cure for PTSD and psychosis such as that. The problem is he doesn't have evidence to back up such a big claim, and that's where the drama's coming from. And so while I believe that Messenger Reveals believes this, without evidence, even myself just can't. We need evidence. And I think that what we saw last night, and I'm going to play amateur psychiatrist now, so don't get mad at me. But I think that we saw pent up aggravation on Messenger's part. I think that maybe he has tried to present this information and might have hit a stone wall. So I think that we definitely saw a lot of defensiveness in the messenger, and I think that there's something there with Shannon Q that I think the messenger really feels a need to resolve. And I'm not sure what that is, but I picked up on it almost immediately with talking with Messenger. So I'm not sure what that entails or what that involves, but I think that explains the immediate attacks on Shannon Q. Now, I understand that Messenger explained thoroughly that he wasn't trying to attack her, but watching it back, it does, as soon as she's mentioned, it seems like defensive walls comes up and attacks did begin. I'm going to be talking with Messenger next weekend, and we're going to be delving with subjects like this. So this is going to come up, and we will discuss it. Like I said, I think that they're all genuine people, and I completely 100% have to understand the frustration because I felt it myself with coming from Atheist Rationale and Dragnauct, being people who are going through PTSD. Without evidence of that claim, you are essentially marketing snake oil at this point, and they're going to be very offended by that. I was, as I said, my ex-girlfriend, the one that I talk about, the girl that I would marry, suffers from PTSD, and if there's some magical cure, I would love her to have it. And not even a magical cure, but if the messenger reveals does indeed have a cure, well, I want that to be out there so she can have access to this cure. So it is very aggravating when you say you have a cure and then give reasons why you're not willing to share such a cure. So, I just wanted to put my thoughts out there. Now let's get into the conversation.
Does anybody in the room know why drugs work on us?
I think I do a little bit. I know
neurochemicals in the brain.
Has a lot of knowledge on that. I'm pretty sure.
So in order that they have effect on you, you have to have receptors to accept them into the cells. And what I mean by that is you naturally already have receptors. But why do you already have these natural receptors?
Because they're analogous to other neurochemicals that are already in your brain.
Exactly. In other words, you don't need the drugs. You can just sit there and do it with your brain anyway.
Not necessarily.
Well, yeah, but the issue is that the natural
to induce hallucinations, I guess. Yeah.
No, I have a background in pharmacology from my master's program, but that's not necessarily true because there's defects in a lot of people's brains so that they're not either producing enough of a neurotransmitter or their reuptake are inhibited and they're getting too much of something. So psychotropic medication is meant to balance that back to a normal level. The problem is they don't have any meters that they can put on your brain to be able to determine what that is. So that's why when they issue psychotropic medication, they do it based on weight, they do it based on guess, because even certain medications will only open those quote locks, for 60-70% of the people who take the medicine. So that's why people sometimes have to cycle through different combinations of medications to get to the right dosage and then the right level of it. So
that's more the exception than the norm, though, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one, who's perfect, and two, who's exactly alike, other than identical twins. So, they know those medicines work and do those things they want, but it doesn't work on 100%
You're the
of the people.
PTSD curing guy, aren't you? I forgot.
Wait a minute, Messenger. I thought you were perfect.
So no, I'm not perfect. So what was your name? The guy with the red hat?
You can call me the Atheist Rationale or Tar.
Are you the guy that we've been having a Twitter scuffle?
You guys have been having. I'm sure you guys have been talking about it because your buddy kicked me off.
You
his
jumped
channel.
on my Steve McRae thread. And it was kind of a fun little thing for a little while.
That's been interesting.
I just started reading that
because I started sharing some information about behavioral health because of some of the comments I was seeing in Surus's.
You were claiming that you can cure PTSD, but it can only be treated. It can't be cured.
According to who?
According to modern science.
No, that's
I
not
got
true.
cured of it.
No, you're incorrect, because here's the thing that you guys don't understand, because unless you've gone to school, and I'm talking about the master's or PhD level, then you don't understand all the nuances when it comes down to what's mental illness, what's a mood disorder, what are anxiety disorders, what are things that are attributed to different types of diagnoses.
What in your practice stops the amygdala from getting stuck?
What's that?
What in your practice stops the amygdala from getting stuck? Explain the science to me behind that, and then I might buy that you can cure PTSD.
The issue is not just the amygdala. The amygdala is the thing that regulates emotion.
I know there's more issues than just the amygdala, but
because
that's one angle I can take you on. Because
Rationale,
the cool thing about this is you only have to hit one link in your chain in order to debunk your entire argument. If you can't cure the entire problem, then the problem isn't cured.
Well, there's four.
So tell me how you can fix the amygdala.
There's four internal processes that all dictate how and why we act and choose and decide and behave the way we do. So one of them is a biological process, and this is basically your brain, your neurotransmitters, your hormones, and the effects of your body. Then you also have your cognitive, which is your prefrontal cortex, which regulates your thoughts and ideas. And then you have your midbrain that affects your emotions. That's the hippocampus, the amygdala, the thalamus. And you're talking about a lot of things that you guys don't understand. You guys go out and you read information that are written either
Explain the process that reverses trauma in the brain.
Trauma comes from a number of different things. Trauma isn't just one thing.
And how did you reach that conclusion? What studies did you do to reach that conclusion?
Well, I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling.
Well, you have a master's degree, but that's not what I'm asking. Where's your study?
What do you mean, where's my study?
Where's your study to prove that you can reverse this trauma with
whatever the clients that I work with
practice cure that you're providing?
Because
you haven't described that I've asked you to describe.
I can't sit there and describe to a detail the clients that I've worked with that were healed and cured of PTSD. I can't do it. I can't sit there and say, hey, here's a case study. What do you mean by
cure?
I'm talking about.
You couldn't bring those case studies to a journal?
I'm sure.
I wanted to define cure real quick. I'm sorry. What do you mean by cure?
That you're no longer subjugated to the trauma and the recollection of those traumas in the way that you were when you were suffering the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Is that being cured or managing? Because what I've heard is that people can manage it, but it's not going to go away.
Because that's the same thing they said with personality disorders. And I had clients that were diagnosed with borderline personality disorder that no longer carry the symptoms of those things after 12 and 14 sessions. So
is
everybody
that a cure or is that management?
It's a cure, because if you look at things like dialectical behavior therapy, everything there is reactionary, which means that when you think or reason in this way or you feel in this way, then here's some coping skills to deal with this, or here's the ways that you're going to regulate your mindfulness versus your emotional mind so that you can have a wise mind. And
How do you
those
tell
things,
listen,
I can't have like 20 questions come all at once if you're going to interrupt me.
I mean, I just wanted to ask, how can you tell the difference between management and cure, though?
Because to manage something is like putting a Band-Aid on something, which means that every time you feel a certain way or you're affected in a stressful way, then here's how you should cope and react to it. And I don't teach people coping skills. I teach them how to heal. I teach them how to repair their biological state of being, their cognitive, their experiential ways that they recall and they view their trauma, and also how to manage emotions in a healthy way rather than do emotional regulation, which is what dialectical behavior therapy does. So unless you're curious enough to really understand where I'm coming from on a therapeutic standpoint, then you're just going to sit there and ask me a bunch of questions based on articles.
There's no reason to take any of your case studies seriously until you can effectively show that that's true in a journal. You need a long-term case study that after your treatment, their PTSD is not in any way.
Do they still meet the criteria for it? That's the question. Yeah. Because
there are treatments that can leave people symptomless for months, but there's never been anything that shows that they could be completely cured of their PTSD. It can definitely be managed.
Because all the schools of thought approach psychology and psychotherapy in a way that says, "Hey, here's how we're going to teach you coping skills." And when I practiced,
coping skills are a form of management, though it's not a cure. So you're teaching coping skills?
No, absolutely. That's okay. Again,
what's your process then? I really want to know what your process is. Please explain that to us.
Do you have 4 hours to listen to my process?
I'm sure you can dumb it down here for us for a little bit.
Absolutely not.
You have how many case studies?
With PTSD?
That you also haven't ever brought to the attention of any psychological journal, by the way.
Well, they're documented and they're recorded in the state's behavioral mental health records, so they could be dug up if you want to get a court subpoena for them.
Isn't that against?
Exactly. That's my whole point. It's not a Hippocratic Oath. Hippocratic Oath, it has nothing to do with behavioral health. Behavioral health, we have a code of ethics.
Well, either way, there's still
rights of privacy.
Patient-doctor confidentiality.
That's why I just said you need a court subpoena to get any of those records.
I thought you could bring case studies in redacted form, though.
Yeah. To me, that just sounds like a nice way to cop out instead of bringing any of your attention to the real psychological community. You seem just like a fringe member who can't explain his process in any sort of way and refuses to actually bring his findings out to the world. It's either you're some kind of fucking charlatan who's exploiting people with PTSD.
Understand it. Why don't you want to be curious? Why don't you want it to be something that can be treated in a healthy way that cures it?
Because I want you to bring your findings to the scientific community.
Why?
Because that's what you're supposed to do. There's a process for this.
I
have no reason to take you seriously unless you bring it to the greater scientific world and it gets peer reviewed by other professionals.
Taking me seriously or not taking me seriously is not my problem. Do you get that? I
think is weird is that you're using the word cured in relation to something that is has a lot of convention of not being able to be cured and only managed. And so when you're saying that you've been able to cure it and not that's the term that you're using as an expert in the field, I'm wondering why you're using that language and whether or not you have the ability to back yourself up on that.
And the reason being is because people want to stay in this constant state of victimization. They don't want real healing. They don't want real growth. They don't want to be free from it. They want somebody to blame for it.
This is just some deep sugar shit. If you wanted to get like a...
What you just said is not scientific. What I'm asking for is why are you using the word cure in relation to that?
Because it can be cured, which means that you have no more symptoms of it and you can't be triggered by it anymore. That's my point.
The reason
bring it to the field of peer review.
The reason why the word management is used rather than cure is that it can come back after these sessions.
What is your educational background in behavioral health to be able to speak against what I'm speaking?
I mean, I don't have the. I'm talking to Shannon Q. You might want to pop in at some point, but that's because I was just like, this seems weird. Can I check some my thoughts against yours? And
even Jesus is Lord is disagreeing with you. That's saying something, man.
Like, I don't know.
He's not clinical psychologist.
I wouldn't. I'm not trying to claim any expertise here or anything like that. I'm just saying that, like, I've had like some. I know a lot of people that have had proximity to this issue, and I haven't heard that it's able to be cured before. So if you have some way of actually curing it, but your findings aren't published or they're not part of a published body, I'm wondering why you're using this terminology, and if this is true that you do have a way of curing these things, why aren't you sharing this?
Because I'm in the process of doing those things with the research that I'm doing in the book that I'm writing.
Okay, you're in the book instead of putting anything in.
You probably shouldn't be using words like cure without having that kind of backup yet, because it would be an unknown.
It's just anytime anyone wants to sit down and talk about what they're dealing with. If somebody wants to have a one-on-one conversation and I can take them through a teaching method and not a treatment method, then I can do those things without licensure or without being backed by the state's behavioral health board.
Hey, before emotions rise.
So when you sit there and talk about that these things like personality disorders can't be cured, and that's completely incorrect.
I like.
Is it your practice that licensure? Is that what I'm hearing? Did you say that or?
Hey, before emotions rise, real quick, I'd just like to add something. There is certain peer-reviewed studies that you can look on in regards to these topics. Like I don't know if you guys have looked into the Johns Hopkins research on mystical experience. This altered state that they're inducing in their volunteers. The big message coming out of those research universities is that they're using one single dose of psilocybin, a high dose, and that's it. And it's not the medication of a drug that you have to administer over and over. It's the memory of that experience that is helping these individuals. So it's not, it's something that they consider a spiritual experience.
I've read the study that you're referring to from Johns Hopkins University, if I'm remembering correctly, and it has a 94% efficacy rate at reducing symptoms at, I think, 80%. But I could be wrong on a couple of the details. And either way, that's just a form of management and not a cure. And the science isn't in on whether or not psilocybin is a proper treatment.
Well, not only that, but I don't think that Messenger is advocate. I don't think that's what he's talking about when he's talking about his treatment plan is using psychedelics. I don't think that's his way of doing it.
I think that's missing the point.
Yeah, that's going in a completely different direction. I'm more concerned about the word cure being used.
Yeah, I would be with Ocean on that one.
How would you define cure? No longer has the symptoms.
No longer has the symptoms. Well, they're not returning, right?
Yes, because the therapy that I did when I was working in the behavioral health field for a year, I didn't have clients return. I had clients that had maximum of 12 sessions before they no longer required therapy, and it was without psychotropic medication. No, it isn't. You're making an assumption that it's just management. You're making an assumption that I gave them coping skills to be able to go out and survive despite their symptoms.
So what I understand as being management is that you can have PTSD not displaying symptoms, not displaying symptoms, and yet still have PTSD.
It's about meeting
but you're able to manage it.
Ocean, it's about meeting the criteria for it. Have you ever opened up a DSM?
I'm not a medical expert at all. I'm
not saying it's a medical expert. The only reason that I'm asking you is because if you open up a DSM-5, which is the revision they're on right now, and it'll sit there and say, here is the criteria. If they don't meet the criteria, they're not that diagnosis. So if they still meet the criteria, but they still require treatment, which is whether they're going through cognitive behavior therapy, whether they're going to humanistic, Adlerian, whether they're going to whatever type of therapeutic process they're going through, if they're continuing and needing therapy, then they have not been healed or cured of that disorder that they've been diagnosed with. PTSD is a diagnosis from the DSM-4TR and also the DSM-5.
The problem is it has its potential to relapse. sometimes symptoms manage.
It has
for
its
months.
potential to relapse. Why? Do you want to know why it has the potential to relapse? Because they haven't gotten down to the core things that are creating the symptomology for why somebody's struggling with what they're struggling with.
All right.
We do.
If you want to
here's the
claim that they can be completely removed forever from their symptoms, you
no
need to
different than
show
phobia.
us a long-term case study of
Do you
these
believe
people
phobias
throughout
can be
their
cured?
entire lives with a reduced.
Do you believe that phobias can be cured?
Phobias aren't the same thing as PTSD.
No, I'm just asking a question along the lines of behavioral health. Do you believe phobias can be cured?
I believe that to be a non sequitur, so I'm not even going to answer it. It's
okay.
not the same thing.
Do you believe that mood disorders can be cured?
I think they could be managed and treated.
Okay. Do you believe anything that's diagnosed in the DSM can be cured? Yes or no?
I'm not too familiar with the DSM to make that to draw.
That's what this is all about. This is all about diagnosis and meeting criteria of it.
So what's the criteria?
If I'm sitting there offering you that there's a potential solution for whatever somebody's struggling with based on the diagnosis that they received, and your immediate thing is, hey, let's be curious about this, or let's debunk it because he doesn't have a peer-reviewed journal to support his path.
Here's something I want to point out to you right now.
I'm not suffering from it. You get that? I'm not suffering from those things.
Hey, we have somebody here in the chat right now, Shannon Q, who has
a BA in psychology.
That's
so if you want to bring
and a lot more knowledge
than
than you on the subject.
All right,
if you want to bring her in.
Apparently,
can we get
if you
somebody?
Want to talk credentials over here?
Is somebody willing to drop so Shannon can come in?
I can drop so Shannon can come in.
I'll be right back. I gotta go get it.
I think an important thing to realize.
Hey guys, I'm wondering because I had PTSD because I'm an ex-soldier. I was in Desert Storm. I was in a combat MOS. I suffered from PTSD for years, and I am cured of it, and it's not returning. Now, I know that does not speak to a majority of experience. I understand that. But to say that conclusively it is impossible for someone to be cured of PTSD because the majority are not is a simple falsehood. That's just not true.
Hey, Rage, real quick, do you want me to drop or do you want somebody else to drop? Like, what's up?
It needs to be demonstratable in a peer-reviewed journal. Case in point.
Real quick,
eventually it would be, I suppose.
Let's deal with this first.
Yeah, we need to decide who's going to drop. I'd like Ocean to stay because he's inputting on the conversation. Would somebody that's not so much like to drop for a little while?
Godless,
gentleman that's been
mutable,
typing.
like you guys haven't been talking, so.
I'll drop, man. I don't mind dropping.
All right, cool.
I appreciate it.
Point I want to make because I think there's
later. You're more than welcome to come in. I always stay on later, and I say I'm gonna.
He said till midnight, so that means 3.
Yeah.
I think the issue here is that it's not. They're not saying that it's impossible merely because it defies experience. The issue is that he's making claims without any evidence, and perhaps what he's saying is true, but we can't just believe something that's especially of such great something and if
big
true claim. It's a big claim, and if it was true, it would have a lot of power to be proven. That's the issue here. And
but we are talking about a total practice time of less than a decade, I believe. Is that correct, Messenger?
Are you talking about for PTSD?
Yeah. How long have you been applying these methods?
Well, as far as for treatment, it was back since 2015. So
okay, so we're not even talking about a decade yet.
We're talking less than half a decade.
well, now
and
now
everybody wants a 20-year study based on it's been being applied for less than a decade. That's not plausible.
I know schizophrenics that have been in remission for half a decade before.
Well, schizophrenia is a very different disorder, just like bipolar 1 disorder is. See,
Sure.
Post-traumatic stress disorder is not a biological problem. It's a cognitive and emotional problem that affects the biology. And it's no different than when people get into substance abuse.
Hello, Shannon Q.
Welcome,
Hey,
Shannon
Shannon.
Q.
hello.
Shannon.
How's things? Things good? Everybody good? Everybody having a good time?
Sorry for talking you up horribly. I tried though.
Did you talk me up horribly? I was in
It
and
might
out.
be someone.
No,
It
I
might
think
be
they've
good
made
to
you-
have someone knows what the
A lot of
what
these
the guys
people,
are talking about.
a lot of people have made Shannon Q their behavioral health messiah.
What? Why
It started
would
on
they?
It started on
That's a weird thing
Thursday's
to
channel.
say.
What are you talking about? I told people
this channel because I said that I said personality disorders and PTSD could be cured, and they lost their shit.
Why do you use the word cure?
I don't know if that's
because I believe that they no longer would have the symptoms of those things, and therefore no longer be triggered and affected in the ways that they had in the past. So that's why I say cure, healed.
Yeah, mental health symptomologies are we don't use the word cure, because that would be like saying I was cured from feeling sad, right? Like you change your mental states, you don't cure mental states, you augment them, right?
Well, that's just using terminology. Cure just means you're free from it, that you're healed from it, that you no longer have the symptoms of it.
Okay, so how do you do that? How do you go about curing PTSD?
Well, there's multiple things. One, everything that's with the symptomology of it's unique to each individual. So first off, you have to understand what's driving those things themselves from a cognitive, experiential, and emotional standpoint, because it's all those three things, those three processes are affecting the biological. So you have to start there. And if they are dealing with things like with suicidal ideation, or if they're dealing with homicidal ideation, or if they're dealing with depression that's going comorbid with their PTSD, then you have to look at the person as a whole. You can't just sit there and say, hey, with PTSD, here's exactly step 1, 2, 3, how we get through this. It isn't that way. And it never is with any treatment in behavioral health.
So you're saying that you have a methodology that will essentially cure using your terminology, or 100%. Augment or change the mental state of anybody.
Yes. And basically what I'm calling it is new lens therapy.
How does it work?
What do you mean, how does it work?
How does it work? What do you do? What are the steps that you take?
Well, there has to be, obviously, assessment is no different than there'd be assessment in any way that anybody assesses clients. So you have to sit there and understand their biological, cognitive, experiential, and emotional well-being, and how they process information and how they cope with the world. What are the things that they struggle with specifically, and what are the underlying factors, not just from the events themselves that created it, but also from childhood, adolescence, and their background.
What qualitative inventory do you use to differentiate the experience in order to be able to create a treatment methodology? So like to differentiate somebody that has PTSD from somebody who has bipolar disorder, for example.
We use differential diagnosis. It's in the DSM.
So you use the DSM differential diagnosis technique?
You use the cross-cutting tools as well. Absolutely.
Okay, so
are you a practitioner?
No, I'm not a practitioner, but
I'm just asking.
No, I'm not, and I've never pretended to be.
No, I'm not accusing you. I just was trying to get your background. Are you an intake specialist? Are you a BHT? Are you a BHP?
No, I have a BA in psychology, an honors BA in psychology with a focus in perceptual cognition and communication theory. I'm on record saying that just about everywhere. So I'm not a clinician, and if what you're attempting to establish is my
I'm not trying to debunk your stuff. I'm not going to debunk you because of your education background. I just wanted to understand it. That's all.
Yeah, I haven't made any claims. I'm just asking questions.
And that's fair. And I just want you to know I'm not attacking your credentials.
Oh, okay. So you were just curious about my credentials.
100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I want to understand where you're coming from when you're making the statements that you do. That's all.
Oh, what statement did I make that you were curious about?
About sit there and saying, how do I sit there and come up with a differential diagnosis, which is a very clinical term, and most bachelor level students wouldn't have that background.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well,
that's why I asked. I was really curious, because I thought, okay, maybe she's an intake specialist. Maybe she's done assessment, for that position. Or maybe you worked as a BHT underneath therapist where you actually practice. So I wasn't sure.
No, I focused on cognition, and the reason I focused on cognition and communication was because I ultimately wanted to work with people with autism.
That's cool. With a cognitive background, did you do any studies for Ellis or Beck and subscribe to their viewpoint and worldview on behavioral health?
No.
Okay. Did you have a particular person or school of thought that you more adhered to, even in your bachelor's program?
Did I have a particular person or school of thought?
Did you just subscribe to cognitive behavior therapy or Adlerian theory or humanistic?
I like cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, because that stuff came from Ellis and Beck, so that's why I asked about them. That's all. Okay. Let's go back into dialogue. I'm good.
All right.
So I said that, I use the DSM-5. I used to use the DSM-4 TR, and then I also use the cross-cutting tools that are also available with the DSM-5.
Okay, perfect. So you use the cross-cutting tools that are available within the DSM-5. So we'll just say you use all the tools for establishing diagnosis. you're absolutely, I'm certain, qualified to establish diagnoses. So once you get to the point where you can establish a diagnosis and you know what the issue is, how do you get from there to the point where you can say that you're able to completely alleviate symptoms? I'm really intrigued, because if you can do that, that's something I would want to know about. Like, I'm just curious.
Well, again, it comes from it's a very similar to cognitive behavior therapy. Again, it differentiates itself in the fact that the problem with cognitive behavior therapy is it doesn't sit there and incorporate how the biology has an impact on cognitive and behavior, and how cognitive and behavior impacts biology, and how those things intermingle with each other. The other problem is if treatment for psychotropic medication is required, first off, most master level practitioners either need a nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist or MD to be able to work in conjunction for psychotropic medication. The problem with psychotropic medication is that it doesn't work for everybody or work the same for everybody. So if you had somebody that was really dealing with suicidal ideation and they did need an antidepressant, then, or even an SSRI to help deal with it, it may not work with them. And then, they usually have to do 6 doses. Once they do 6 doses, it regulates in the body. From there, you have to monitor for 3 to 4 weeks to even see what type of behavioral effects that it has on there. And then does dosage need to, or does the treatment have to, or the prescription need to change, or does it need a different level of dosage, either higher or less?
Yeah, because an SSRI will only work if your neural receptors aren't absorbing serotonin fast enough, because it's a reuptake inhibitor, right?
That makes sense.
It is, yeah. And the other problem with it is you don't know when your clients are using, or how the using is affecting those things in conjunction with the medication that they're taking. Are they using alcohol?
I agree. I'm not an advocate for, hey, let's just diagnose everybody with something and give them medication.
Yeah. I like medication. To me, is a last resort when something is so prevalent in the biology. So always working with people on a cognitive level more than anything. And obviously you can only do that with usually clients that are in their teens and up. It's almost very difficult to do it with children. And I did work with children and families as well. But when you're dealing with somebody with like PTSD, obviously it's different for every single client, and it's different in terms of it, the severity of it, other comorbid disorders that may go along with it. And you have to look at the person as a whole. You can't sit there and say, hey, here's PTSD, and here's somebody that has PTSD, and they're also having, depression, or they're having an adjustment disorder with anxiety or depression. So to look at somebody as a whole, but I can tell you this, with the clients that I worked with, there was never a single client in the year that I practiced that needed more than 12 to 14 sessions.
See,
to be able
that's where I'm like, whoa, like that's what makes me whoa.
And here's
because that just, you can understand how that would seem like an extraordinary claim, though. Like, I've been reading some research on. I'm a weird person who reads research in her spare time, because
that's not weird. I think it's awesome.
So I'm a loser nerd, even though I only have a BA and I'm not a clinician. But that's what I do. So I've been reading. I think it's Elbican, or it's on early work by Donald Meachbaum. Do you know who Donald Meachbaum is?
I remember the name, but I never studied stuff he did.
Yeah, I mean, so it's some older CBT research. Like, initially when it was called cognitive behavior modification, before it transitioned into the cognitive behavioral therapy, sort of instantiation, where it's actually used in therapeutic practice. This was more so just research models kind of establishing that it had some sort of efficacy. And so I'm just wondering if you incorporate the key principles, and if you incorporate the key principles of these sort of cognitive behavioral modification strategies, how do you augment them in between patients, since we've already established that there's clear differentials between patients, and you seem to say that within 12 sessions you can augment somebody's behavior in a very specific way from patient to patient. So that would tell me that, since we've already acknowledged the fact that there's massive difference between patients and symptomology and diagnostics, then you would need, I would think, massively different and very personalized techniques between patients. Or do you have some sort of overreaching, do you do the systematic examination of the role of cognitive factors that they have with them? Do you do sort of self-instructional training for them on how to mitigate those factors through like role-playing experience and limited exposure? Do you do some sort of like stress inoculation training? And like, do you make them aware of sort of introspective strategies to essentially kind of talk themselves out of emotional states and rationalize with themselves? Are those factors, because those are sort of key components in CBT, and I'm sure you'd agree with me on that. Like, so is that the type of thing that you incorporated, and what do you do that other practitioners aren't doing in order to speed up the process?
Well, one of the things, again, is being curious. And I don't think that most therapists that work professionally, whether they be social workers or clinical counselors, do this. Is people are quick to assess and diagnose. And then once they diagnose, based on their schooling, they put people in a category or bubble, and they attempt to treat around that. And that's a problem. That's probably the biggest problem. Second thing is a lot of therapists and practitioners, especially those I even went to school with, were very unhealthy in their own nature. They haven't taken care of their own issues and problems, which leads for transference and countertransference issues, which means they're getting. So when you're talking about even doing the assessment and getting ready to do treatment, that's a big problem in itself in the behavioral health community. So as far as my approach, if people can at least get through and be curious enough to understand what they're really dealing with the individual that they're working with, then from that standpoint, yes, there has to be a understanding and introspective view of helping them understand themselves by giving them a model that they can look at and say, yes, this is how the way that I act and behave, and these are the determinants that are driving these actions, behaviors, choices, decisions, expressions, feelings.
So a strong introspective focus, and I'm sorry to interrupt, it's just there's a lot of interesting things to dissect.
There is that aspect of it, and I have a human response model that helps them understand how and why they act and behave the way that they do.
Do you think that's unique from person to person, though, based on the experiences that, because you would probably, I guess, agree too that PTSD is situational. So you would have to have had a traumatic experience, obviously, in order to get PTSD. So that's situational, right? Which means that.
And most of the people that I dealt with in PTSD situations were either people coming out of prison or people coming out of war. Right. So just to give that, that's about as general as I'll give for the clients that I worked with. They were either coming out of prison and they were court ordered, or they were coming out of war and they were having symptoms of dealing with the effects of that. So the people that I worked with PTSD were of those two categories. And I know that there's a number of other ones.
So is there something specific? Okay, so what I've heard you say, if I'm making, just to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly, is that you think that some of the reasons that these introspective tools don't work in other practitioners who practice cognitive behavioral therapies or something akin to that is because they essentially have their own baggage and that's projected onto the clients.
I think so, because I think that when people, and here's the biggest problem that I have with behavioral health.
It seems like a bit of a generalization, though, don't you think?
No, it isn't, because I saw the direct effects with it with colleagues and clients that were working with other people, or people who were coming to me that the let's say the therapist left, and all of a sudden picking up caseloads from another therapist and see, what they've been through, and have clients go, I don't want to go through this again. I don't want to talk about my problems again. I don't want to talk about, all the stuff that happened to me.
Right.
And the approach that I took in the therapeutic model I had, I don't have to have you tell me what you went through in order to be able to. No. And I'll tell you
that's fascinating. Why? Yeah, please do.
And I'll tell you why. Because if you see how people are acting and behaving in the present, which means this is how they act, this is how they behave, and here's the struggles that they're having in the present and how they're looking at their future, it tells you the background of the things that are probable that have happened to them. And because you have that information, instead of sitting there revisiting and saying, here's how you cope with those things that have happened to you, you give them a lens of how to view themselves and others in the world that they live in a healthy way. And once those healthy cognitive perspectives have taken place, they can look at the present in a healthy way with peace and contentment, and they can look at those past experiences. And that's what happened with all of those clients along the path. There were some clients that only came to 4 to 6 sessions.
But what's your strategy though? Like I'm still not hearing a strategy. It seems essentially like you're saying, okay, I can see behavioral outcomes, and based on those behavioral outcomes, without even asking them to delve, because I'm assuming you probably think that brings up some sort of emotional trauma for them to relive, or they get frustrated by it.
No, if they want to discuss it, if they do have a desire to discuss it, that's perfectly
fine.
Okay.
But you don't elicit that. Okay, I get that. So what you're saying is, if they want to volunteer, then great. And if they don't want to volunteer, you're kind of retroactively inferring what might have happened to bring them to that state based on a contingency of behavioral outcomes that falls within a spectrum that would usually be elicited from a common a segment of previous actions or events that tend to elicit that type of state, and then you go from there. So I mean, essentially you're taking an educated guess at what might have happened to bring them to that point based on their behaviors, and then
it's not just an educated guess, it's giving them a healthy model for who they are and what drives who they are, so that they can better understand themselves. So I'm equipping people to be their own experts.
So it doesn't matter what happened to them in the past, essentially, then. If they want to talk about it, that's fine. But that's not a part of the treatment model because it doesn't factor into the tools you're giving them in order to be able to cope internally with their thought processes. So
that is more accurate, yes.
Okay, so then at that point, my question would be, how do you establish what their internal thought processes are? I understand that you go through the DSM diagnostic tool, but if you're not really
cross-cutting tools are there so that you can make an accurate diagnosis, because it must be there. And another problem that I had with behavioral health is they were so non-committal with diagnoses, which means everything was an NOS.
Yeah, well, because there's so much divergence.
Well, right? No, they didn't want to commit because everything was a cover your ass.
Well, that's fair too. I can agree with that.
And in public behavioral, especially in public behavioral health, the number one thing was billable hours. Number two thing was cover your ass. And then number three thing was, if we can help some people, we can, but we're probably not going to help a whole lot of people.
Well, I know people who don't think like that, though. A lot of people who are my peers who don't think or operate like that.
Well, I'm glad because especially in public behavioral health, especially in this state, it's horrible.
Yeah, well, I'm in Canada, so maybe it's different here.
Oh, Canada. No,
that's right. So
what time zone are you in?
I'm in Nova Scotia. So
that doesn't help me with the time zone.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I couldn't hear you. I thought you said
like here it's 8:00 p.m.
It's midnight almost.
Okay.
So I'm still not really clear on exactly how you equip them with those tools. I mean, you've said a lot about how you get there and how you assess and
tell me
sort of generalities about it.
Tell me this though. Because again, you and I could talk for 3 or 4 hours, and I don't think we're still going to get to where you want to get to. Would you be willing to make time every week from now for the next 2 months, every week for at least an hour, to have discussions with me privately regarding this?
An hour a week?
Yes.
That's a big commitment for me.
You have 112 waking hours each week.
I'm also a single mom.
More like you're trying to deliberately dodge defining your mechanism of action.
Well, hold on for a second.
You're not the arbiter of what my free time looks like and what I do.
No, I didn't say you had free time. I just said you had 112 hours each week.
I run a baseball league. I play competitive soccer. I have a full-time job. I run a YouTube channel. I'm booked on streams. And I'm a single mother whose child is also in sports, has school, and believe it or not, has friends. And also, so do I. Every once in a while, I get to see them.
Shannon,
so an hour a week is quite a bit. And I sleep
Shannon, could I suggest something, Shannon? Because you mentioned this earlier. If he had something, I don't know, peer reviewed and published, you would make time to read it, correct?
Absolutely, 100%.
So
if you want to send me something to read, I'd read it, absolutely.
So my question is, so if what he's saying is so efficacious, why can't we just simply read about it? In peer review, just like I would go and read anything in my field.
Yeah, because I just don't even get what it is. Yeah. That's what I
I've still not heard an answer to that, because I heard the other gentleman ask it, and then you came in asking about it, and I've still not heard a solid reason why.
I never once claimed that it was peer reviewed.
Well, that's why I'm asking why not. That's essentially what I'm asking.
Because I didn't want to make time to do it at this point.
Okay, so you're purporting that you have this system that is more efficacious than what you perceive to be the standard in the field, but you don't want to make time to actually put it through its paces and produce something that could potentially revolutionize the field and actually help patients and, by your words, cure
what's actually happening.
It would, because it's a universal model for human behavior, which does not exist out in the field right now.
Okay, so then that still doesn't give me a reason as to really why you would not publish it, so that people like Shannon and others who are curious, that they can look at it and go, oh, okay, sure, I see exactly what he's talking about.
The simple answer is this, and nobody's going to like it. The simple answer is this. If you guys understood, and the world understands how and why we act the way we do, there's going to be people in positions of power and authority that abuse it.
Whoa.
The thing is, if there was any accuracy to his claims, people would probably be throwing funding his way to actually study the shit.
Oh, well, lots of
you can't.
You understand?
3 years isn't enough time to establish any sort of long-term case study, or even 3 years also isn't enough to even gather a proper.
I've been doing this for 13 and a half years.
Well, I just said that I practiced. What's the word I'm looking for? You already told us that you've only been doing this cure method since 2015.
You're not.
You said you've only been doing this since 2015.
You listen. You're repeating yourself, buddy.
What I'm saying is, I said that I practiced with clients for the last 3.5, almost 4 years. I said that I've been doing this, and I've said it on my live streams. 13 and a half years I've been doing study and research regarding this, and it's applicable to my own life and how I act and behave.
Okay, so
you can't bring it to a peer-reviewed journal.
Well, hold on for a second.
Bring it to a peer-reviewed journal. If that's your be-all end-all,
you'd be set to earn a Nobel Prize if you could cure PTSD.
Hold on.
Helping people.
You could potentially help millions of people if you actually brought your findings to the scientific forefront.
Damage millions of people because people abuse it.
How could you claim to be moral if you want to, like,
is this thing on? Hold on.
Make all of these people suffer by not showing?
Tari, you're very excited.
Reggie, let this other guy talk. The guy with no shirt on.
I've been waiting to get it.
The reason why I take this argument so personally is because I've been diagnosed with PTSD from childhood trauma, and
yeah, I know people with PTSD.
Charlatanry really irks me.
Would you like to be free from it?
Like,
yes or no?
I'm a real big James Randi fan.
Yeah, so I get it. Like Atheist Rationale, I get it. Like, I get it. As somebody who does suffer from PTSD, I get it, man. But the issue is that when you have people who are convinced that what they produce is efficacious, and then you ask them why they haven't done it, that should tell you right there. Like, there's no actual reason. And that's like the piece of information I wanted to give you guys is that the VA, the Department of Defense, since 2012 has given at a minimum $100 million for people to research PTSD and TBI. So there is no shortage of funds for people to go into this field, whether it be cognitive behavioral therapy or various other means to help this situation, because it is an epidemic where you have people committing suicide. So
at a very high rate, especially
at a very high rate, but still that should be encouraging for somebody who is supposedly curing it to go and publish stuff.
The biggest problem with military members suffering from PTSD is not what they go through in the war, but what their preparation and before they go to it.
Okay.
Because here's the thing. Let me finish. If I took military members through a training course for 12 weeks, very few would ever come back with PTSD.
Okay, so here's the thing. I think have you ever actually gone through basic training?
Yes,
I have.
Okay, so you are a former military member then?
Prior service Air Force.
Huh? Air Force. Okay. Oh God. Okay. So what you thought you went through in Air Force? I'm sorry. I'm just going to be real with you. I'm just going to be real with you. What you went through in the Air Force is nothing. I went to Sand Hill, the home of the infantry. Okay, like I get it. We went through some rough stuff, but that's the point that I'm making. It varies greatly. I don't. So if we're talking about the experiences in basic training that can prime you for PTSD, then that has to first be established. If you're relying on peer-reviewed research that can show that people have PTSD post basic training, then I would take your point. But is that statement that you just made, is that backed by peer review? Have people actually found PTSD in I mean large swaths of soldiers post basic training?
No, I have not presented my information for peer review.
Okay, but just
specific reasons that I already answered.
But that's a problem. So if you're making these claims, that's a problem. That's a problem because you know that once people look at your
to receive this information, You believe that it's going to be helpful for people to receive this information, but I'm telling you that there's people in positions of power, prosperity, and greed that are going to use it for their own benefit.
Hey guys, doesn't Jilly Juice say the reason why she doesn't like bring any of her research to peer review is because she thinks that people are gonna take advantage of her cure or some bullshit like that?
Right, that's not a straw, man.
Jilly Juice.
I'm not talking about bringing it to people to help them, because I'll help any individual that ever wants to make time for help.
So,
and there's probably not a single person on this panel who doesn't need help.
You're saying that you're not going to bring your findings because of some perceived conspiracy.
I'm saying that I will not present it to the world.
Can you bring any evidence of that conspiracy being even true? How do you know people are going to take advantage of this? How do we know you're just not a charlatan who doesn't want to help?
I understand
all the people he claims to be able to help.
Because I understand human behavior.
I granted, sure, you understand human behavior.
And if you look at things from my perspective or worldview, I don't suffer from the things that you suffer from, though I used to.
I mean, you can delude yourself into believing lots of things like that. But I'm not inside your head. You're not inside mine or anyone else's. So if we're going to talk about,
how do you ever come to a rational conclusion?
Okay, so if you have to defer to a book in order to make a diagnosis, then we already know how we figure these things out. Like
I didn't say I had to defer to a book, but I'm saying if you're doing assessment and diagnosis, you must refer to the DSM-5.
Sure, and that is based off of peer-reviewed research, is it not?
I can't say that 100% because it's the American Psychiatric Association that creates the DSM-5, and why they changed it from the DSM-4 model.
Is based on peer-reviewed research.
It wasn't based on peer-reviewed research. It was based on a lot of things. There was a lot of research. There was a lot of diagnosis that changed. No, because here's the problem with the DSM-5.
I mean, you're avoiding.
So listen to me.
I would like it.
Here's the problem with the DSM-5.
You're offering vagaries
to create behavioral health into a medical model, and behavioral health is not a medical model.
Okay, so let's get a straight answer out of you for one thing. Is the DSM based on peer-reviewed research? Yes or no?
No, it's not.
No. So there's no peer-reviewed research ever present.
You're trying to make it an absolute black and white. Some of it is.
Some of it. Okay, yes. Then that's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying the entire thing. I say is some of it, is a portion of it based on peer-reviewed research.
Some of it is 100%.
Okay. So does it change based on peer-reviewed research? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. What other extraneous factors would also change the DSM? Take your time.
Probably. Does anyone else see the irony here?
Probably new research.
New research. Would that be peer-reviewed research?
It depends.
Is there non-peer-reviewed research that you know of in the DSM that has changed it?
Well, the thing is you're looking at a difference. You do realize there's no treatment plan in the DSM-5.
I didn't answer that question.
Diagnostic manual. It's not made for treatment. It's diagnostic.
Thank you. So again, what I'm talking about is treatment methods, and you're talking about diagnosis methods.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm trying to just establish something here. Then that's fine. Like we talk about that. I mean, you can scallop all day, but I would like to stay on one topic, because when people ask you direct questions, you have a habit of not answering, and you go off to something else. But I guarantee you that I can talk way more than you. So how about we have a respectful conversation and let each other talk instead of talking?
CBT is peer reviewed quite a bit, actually.
100%.
Okay, so you do
like a ton, like a shit ton.
So when people do submit things in that field, it causes change, does it not?
Not always.
Not always. Okay, no. So is there a cabal of people that say that, well, people can't find actual cures that you know of that you can?
I feel like I should clarify. Historically, it causes discussion, which eventually leads to change.
Yeah, that's a.
If there's enough research that forms consensus, yeah.
I'm trying to just establish where this cabal is of evil scientists that are trying to hold back your research that's so remarkable that no one will ever take it seriously.
I don't care if people take it serious or not. I really don't.
Okay, well then why are you here trying to convince people that it's miraculous if you really don't care?
I'm not talking about miraculous. I'm talking about when I go onto a channel and I'm listening to a dialogue of very defeatist and very accepting abnormal feeling and behavior as something that's normal, and we're just going to suffer for the rest of our lives. It disheartens me, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, it's
so that's why I spoke up on that channel and said, listen, do you guys realize that it doesn't have to be this way? You can't sit there and take a victim mentality and sit there and focus on who's to blame, because that does not matter if you ever want treatment or healing within you, which is what I believe is being cured from those things.
You're coming very close to coming across as like people's personal Jesus. I hope you know that. It's very egotistical what you're doing, man.
Because this
has nothing to do with me.
Well, actually, I think it does, because when I first started listening to you, the first thing you did was demean people who did first let everyone know you had a master's degree, then demean people who had some education in the field, and then claim that it wasn't relevant. And even after you asked about 3 clarifying questions concerning their education, people don't posture that much on here unless they actually care about that sort of stuff. You do realize that, right?
I don't care what other people do.
Yes, you do, because you're engaging in a conversation concerning what people do.
From my perspective, I was curious, and you guys don't understand the difference of being curious and debunking, because that's what you people do. I don't.
Yeah, well, you know very little about me.
Can I interject for 1 second?
I said you people as a whole.
Wait,
because you're drawing assertions.
Oh my gosh, can I just 1 second? I'm sorry, I'm quieter than I usually am. I think what he's referring to is more so, yeah, you did ask about my qualifications, and I'm assuming that you're probably referring about me, because that's where this dialogue went.
Yes.
It's when you preface that by saying things like Shannon Q is people's personal psychology messiah, right? And
that was a reference to Cyrus's channel, just
right.
So you know.
Yeah. But I understand. But when you, I actually don't understand because I didn't see it. But what you're doing is you're setting up a narrative in people's minds when you use that as an introduction to your question. Maybe this wasn't in your intent, but it seems as though you're saying, oh, Shannon's everybody's personal messiah, and then you introduce what my qualifications are, and then you're able to kind of diminish my qualifications by saying, see, she doesn't live up to that expectation that I just set. So it's a neat sort of communication tactic that some people use so that they can say, I was just asking questions, when really you were setting up an opportunity so that you could establish my criteria and my qualifications with the preface that, hey, people think you're a messiah, but when you look at it in reality, she's actually.
Wow, he never tried to tear you down.
No, he didn't have to, because he used that to establish the preface for what he was just about to do.
Because
I studied communication with my BA.
Shannon, you're absolutely right. Shannon, your point is absolutely right. But do you realize on their channel, they stated, and I do quote, Shannon will tear him apart when it comes to this stuff.
Okay, well, I didn't watch that, and what other people say about me doesn't have anything to do with my actions.
But it does, because they're posturing you as somebody who is the advocate and the expert of behavioral health.
I'm an advocate for.
No, I'm just telling you that from their viewpoint.
And I have a larger knowledge base than perhaps they do and some other people.
I agree 100%.
I'm pretty sure people were just expressing the fact that they wanted this conversation to eventually happen, and you're extrapolating way too much from it.
Yeah,
right. And you're projecting that onto me in the conversation, and that kind of leaves a bad taste in some people's mouth.
I haven't brought it up since the beginning. And
right.
I told you I was really curious. I was curious.
I believe that you were, but that's what he's prefacing, and I think that there's some efficacy to it. So I just wanted you to just maybe acknowledge that, because it seemed relatively clear, but isn't always able to be articulated. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go back to being quiet again.
No, you don't have to be. Please speak up.
Well, no, I think this is interesting, because on the one hand, you want to leverage your education, you want to leverage different things, but then when people ask you to leverage your work and actually provide it, so that people can benefit from it,
I have no problem sharing it. I have no problem. Listen to me. I have no problem sharing any information that I've learned about with any human being. I don't have a problem with sharing some of the ideas and concepts. But unless you want to sit there and really take it on a one-to-one level, let's say I'm talking to you about some of the things you're struggling with. I'm talking to some of the things about anybody struggling with. I've had those conversations even with Nakasuchi on the channel saying, hey, here's what I'm seeing and here's what I think. Here's the way that I perceive this, and here's how I think this can change or be better. I'm not doing it for my own personal benefit. I'm not doing it to proselytize. I'm not trying to do it for any personal benefit other than trying to help the world be a better version of itself.
You just personally proselytized for me just a little while. You asked me if I wanted to be cured from my PTSD.
No, I'm saying, I said, no, that's not what I said.
That conversation was brought up on the channel because I'm proselytizing as somebody in the chat. That's why that conversation even happened in the first place.
You're strawmanning.
May I?
No, let me finish my point.
The
reason being is because I asked you if there's a potential for a cure for PTSD, wouldn't you want it?
Right.
This is a loaded question, so fuck that bullshit.
Okay, may I interject again for just one moment, and then I'm actually probably going to go because it's like 12:15 here, and I'm old and tired. So
it's 48. You're not old. That's not right.
So here's my question, and this is a legitimate question and an honest question. So you're saying that you're doing this because you want to help people and you want to offer them help. You're also saying you essentially hold the keys to the kingdom, but you're not willing to give it out because reasons, right? So that can seem suspect. You have to admit that can seem suspect, because you're saying you're waving a carrot in front of somebody and saying, you can't have it though, and I can't give you details on how I even got this carrot, but I have it. But you're not though. That's what I was trying to elicit, is like, and instead of even starting to, you just asked me if I would give up an hour of my time once a week for a month to have conversations with you privately about it. But that doesn't help anybody else, even if you are accurate, except for me. And if you want to help more people, then why don't you use that 1 hour that you have every week to make a video about it, telling everybody what you were going to tell me, so that you can help us all instead of just talking to me about it.
Let me ask you one question, because I know you've ran across me in the past. You've seen my channel and you've seen me pop up. Have you been to my channel?
Actually, I think I went on your channel once.
Okay.
A while ago. You were talking to somebody.
Did you see anything out there about freedom from anxiety, freedom from depression, freedom from stress?
I don't think so. You were talking to another dude, and it was about a month ago, the only time I saw it. And it was like a 2-hour long hangout.
My channel's filled with an unplugged series that addresses a lot of these individual issues.
Where do you direct me so I can watch it?
The Messenger Reviews.
No, I know that, but which playlist lays out your
unplug from worldly thinking?
Okay, so that series will lay out your clinical plan to be able to cure people from this.
For a foundation of it, but yeah, absolutely. Let me finish.
Yeah, I want to know this. Yeah.
And the only other teaching I would say, and again, it has a very, how I link it to Christianity is the secrets of the kingdom. The heart is where I get into how and why we are the way we are. That's the only other one that deviates. I would say, if you want to look at something in the secrets of the kingdom teaching, the heart was the one where I addressed human behavior.
What's the secrets of the kingdom? So where do I go to find out how I can cure mental health issues? Is that series will tell me how to cure mental health issues?
I think the heart issue would give you the closest thing, especially part 2.
Could you give me a synopsis?
Again, it comes down to biological healthiness, cognitive empowerment, experiential healing, and emotion management.
It sound like vagaries and platitudes, honestly. Like if somebody were to ask me, well, Drag, how do you think that the next therapeutic, target should be determined? Well, I think you should look at PD-L1 and its association with necrosis factor, gamma, and I think from there, I'll give specifics and a mechanism of action or a plan of action on how to approach that.
Here's
but
the thing.
if you nice things, then you see the difference
for any human being that wants to make time for whatever they're struggling with.
Well, or you could put it in peer review and we can read about it, and then clinicians can, institute it.
Sure. Wait 10 years for that.
That's fine. I'll be fine waiting 10 years by people review it and then consult it and then do everything.
So you'll suffer for 10 years. You could have answers in 6 to 12 weeks.
Yes, actually, because I would rather it be refined than having just whatever spit out at me.
If it means millions of other people suffering can get the help that they need, then yes, I would want to wait the fucking 10 years.
Absolutely.
Then good luck with that.
That's why people are skeptical. Like, you understand now why
I do not.
The reason why he refuses to do any peer reviews because he knows that he's going to get laughed at.
No, I don't. I could care less if people laugh at it, because the people laughing are the ignorant people who will continue to suffer with it.
Well, then when we offer you an avenue that any other person...
You're not offering me anything. I'm offering you the truth, and you're the one that's suffering from things. I don't suffer from
the avenue is already
from anxiety. I don't suffer from depression. I don't suffer from any of those things that you guys continue to suffer from.
That are suffering.
I'm sorry that you're suffering, but I don't suffer.
We're not talking about what my personal struggles are or what your personal struggles are. We're talking about
the millions of people the truth. I'm fine with that.
By bringing your research to the surface, to the scientific community, to the psychological community. Why you would refuse to help out all of these people that exist?
I don't refuse anything.
Beyond me.
You guys demand something that continues to fail you.
All it shows is that you're morally
you guys continue to go to therapy with therapists that don't do anything to deliver you from the things that you suffer from.
Feed your ego. That's terrible.
Well, hold on for a second. How do you know the effects of my therapy? I'm curious. Well, hold on. How do you know the effects of my therapy?
Because if your therapy was going well, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Or maybe it has gone well, and I see the value in it, and I'm encouraging you to go the same route that my therapist went.
I don't have those issues.
Is that a possibility?
I don't have those issues.
Answer the question. No. Please answer my question.
What's your question?
Please. Okay. So maybe I see how efficacious my treatment was, and I want you to go through the same steps that my therapist went through.
One of the things.
Tell me how your life is better because of your therapy.
Just answer my question. Because
I don't know what your therapy is.
Every time I ask you a direct question, please answer the question, either yes or no. It's fine.
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
Because you haven't given me anything.
You don't know, but you're making assessments about my life and my treatment.
But you have an issue with my worldview.
Why? So how are you able to determine that?
We're just asking.
Because obviously my assertions interfere with the treatment you've received.
Not at all. But again, how do you know the efficaciousness?
My assertions interfere with the treatment you've received and what you've been told. That's the difference.
What have I been told?
I don't think
you want
so.
standard stuff.
Like treat any mental health condition, but they right now have more scientific backing.
You have a peer-reviewed article from a bunch of ignorant-ass people that don't do anything to help you than somebody who's offering you the truth.
Wow. Because they don't agree with you?
It has nothing to do with agreeing with me. It's not working for you. If it was working for you, you'd have a problem with it.
You're presuming what happened during my treatment.
Looking into, I have empathy for the millions of other people that are suffering. It's not just about me.
You're standing against people you don't understand.
I'm not. You have this weird ego thing where you need to be people's personal Jesus, and you don't want to share this because you can have that link with that person.
You guys are proud of your PTSD.
Terrible,
no, you guys are proud of your PTSD. You're proud.
I'm not sure how you can be proud of it.
Yeah, no, you're acting like you're proud of it.
I'm okay. So I'm asking him, why doesn't he put up or?
I don't know how I'm acting like I'm proud of it. Bring it up. The only person who's bringing up our anybody.
If you want to make
on this panel,
well-being, I'll make time for you.
Make time for yourself and put your stuff through the rigors everybody else did. Quit being lazy. That's what I want you to do.
I'm not being lazy.
You're being lazy. You're absolutely being lazy.
I'm not suffering.
If everyone else can do it, and there's this magical cabal out there who doesn't like me, and they're going to swat my stuff away because they're going to be heads.
He has to hide behind a conspiracy because he can't provide any evidence for his.
Well, hold on first. I want some clarification on this conspiracy. Where does this cabal reside? Are they in Oklahoma? Are they in Omaha, Nebraska? Where are they at exactly? Can you point them out? Do they have big hats? Do they have funny teeth?
Now you're drawing assertions to something to sit there and defame something.
I'm asking because you're the one who posited the conspiracy.
It's hard anything back it up in the first place.
Listen, if you guys don't want help, that's cool. Say I don't want help.
No, I've already gotten.
You're not trying to get help. That's not why we're arguing. Why are you trying to bring it back to that?
That's not my problem because that's what
talking about our problems. That's not what this conversation is about.
You're the one suffering from this stuff, not me.
We're talking about whether or not you can provide any evidence for your claims, and the fact is you can't. You refuse to bring it up to peer review because you have some conspiracy theory that you've cocked up.
I'm saying why I haven't brought it to it yet.
You refuse to help out the millions of people you can potentially help.
Millions of people don't want help. They want to sit there and go down the same line I thought you do, which is shit can't be healed. My life sucks, and it can't be any better than it is.
No, I've never heard that at any time.
I'm not proselytizing anything because I could give a shit if you come to my channel or not.
Well, that's why
it's up to you. I'm not struggling with what you're struggling with.
That's why you keep asking me if I want to be free from my problems. Is this because
you drink the Kool-Aid, everything will be fine? I promise.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with drinking Kool-Aid. It has to do with is what you believe working for you.
I'm trying to my best to avoid talking about my issues or whatever.
Is working with your is what I believe working for you.
I explained why I was passionate about the subject, and I try to leave it there.
I'm just asking you, is what you believe working for you?
If you would want to show me any respect, you'd stop bringing it up and asking me if I want to be fucking cured. Let me do my own thing and leave it at that. Right, dude?
Answer that question.
What a productive conversation.
No, I think it's a great shit show, I must say.
I think it's working fine. I do like calling out
Charlotte. It was so...
I'm not a Charlotte.
It was so great and entertaining, in fact, that I went and listened to the entire Sonic 2 fucking soundtrack, got back here, and you guys were still talking about the same dead shit. Fucking drop it.
I'm not gonna lie.
By the way, Atheist Rationale, what kind of stupid fuck wears his headphones over his hat that's also covered by his long ass hair? How can you fucking hear?
Rage, you want to bring him into this?
It works, man.
All right, well, you got some fucking Superman hearing or some shit. Motherfucker's over here, he's got cans on his head. Jesus.
These are like hella cheap though, and they get the job done, and that's all that fucking matters. Really.
Well, let me get my gay little beanie out. I want to fucking join you. We'll do an experiment. See, listen, we can peer review this shit right now. I'll get my gay hat, and you can wear your gay hat, and we'll see who can hear better. Can somebody whisper real quick? We'll do a sound check. Give me a minute.
I'll whisper right now.
There we go.
Leave it to Will.
There we go. All right.
Conversation.
The irony is that these guys want healing. He's offering it, and they're practically shooting him down on purpose.
If you can't prove it in any sort of like,
so I'll bite.
Oh, I don't have any stupid fucking
your money where your mouth is.
Let me put some stupid fucking glasses on. Give me a minute.
I'll bite. I'll bite for a second. Specifically, in my case, what are you? And don't offer me a platitude, please.
There we go.
In my case, can you name something specific that you're going to offer me that differs from any other clinician out there for this matter?
I will help you understand how and why you're struggling with the things that you do in a way that is unique and that you haven't heard of before.
Okay, that's a platitude. Like I specifically asked you not to give me any type of label. I literally prefaced the entire thing by saying that.
How are you ever going to know?
Why are we bringing platypuses into this? I don't understand. It's too late at night. Can you fucking slow down, my dude? God damn. And what's it with the fucking shirt? Just wear a shirt, the tank top or something.
No,
Jesus Christ. Well, I'm not body shaming you. I'm just saying, Jesus Christ, it's barely out of the fucking winter yet, and you're fucking.
It's Texas. It's hot.
One thing that we need to like probably bring to the forefront that his aforementioned miracle cure somehow involved Christianity and taking people away from their worldly thinking.